determinasyon na maglingkod sa bayan at pangalagaan ng kalikasan ay nakasalalay sa kamay ng mga otoridad ng lungsod at ng lalawigan. Mapapanatili nating maganda ang ating kalikasan kung ito ay tunay na ating poproteksyonan at hindi ang mga investor, ang mga minero ang ating poproteksyonan. At ang interes na pampolitika lamang ang atupagin ng mga politiko ng Palawan. Ako po ang inyong lingkod, Doctor Gerry Ortega.
With these words, Dr. Gerry Ortega, radio broadcaster and environment activist, signed off his program on Puerto Princesa's radio station DWAR on January 21, 2011. 3 days later, Doc Gerry would be dead, silenced by an assassin's bullet in broad daylight inside a store along Palawan's busy streets. Doc Gerry's murder triggered an outpouring of support for his exposés against mining and corruption in Palawan. By the thousands, people came to attend his burial in the quiet town of Aborlan. Politicians, reporters, environmentalists, tribal leaders, even bikers.
Manalangin tayo.
Thousands more attended a candlelight vigil 2 days later to honor Ortega in Puerto Princesa City. In death as in life, Doc Gerry's causes as an environmentalist and broadcaster had clearly struck a nerve in Palawan, that is known to be the Philippines' last environmental frontier.
Ang dami kong mga taong hindi kilala na I ended up hugging dahil naging inspirasyon si Daddy sa kanila. Hindi lang kasi siya madaldal eh. Merong depth, meron siyang pinaglalaban. At hindi lang siya basta salita, meron siyang nagagawa.
And whatever he says, everybody listens essentially. It's prime time, it starts at 6:30, it ends at 9 o'clock.
Redempto Anda is a Palawan-based journalist and a friend of Ortega. He says that the broadcaster's hard-hitting commentary made the doctor an easy target.
It's obvious that Gerry has made enemies, a lot of enemies on different fronts. What he did in the political front could be the main reason bakit siya pinatay.
Doc Gerry was the second radio broadcaster shot dead in Palawan in recent years. In 2006, Fernando Dong Batul was also murdered in Puerto Princesa. The police managed to capture the alleged gunman, but the mastermind of Batul's murder remains unidentified 5 years later. But unlike Batul's case, in Doc Gerry's case, the authorities say they believe they have made headway in identifying the alleged mastermind.
At saka very big difference That incident walang nahuli na immediately after the incident. Ito, meron kagad Nandyan yung gunman, nandyan yung baril, na-identify yung may-ari ng Kaya, kompleto.
The capture of the gunman in Doc Gerry's case is a tribute to two things: uninvolved citizenry and technology. Puerto Princesa's closed-circuit cameras showed that on the morning of the murder, the gunman waited for 3 hours along the national highway outside the pet clinic where Doc Gerry works as a licensed veterinarian. Doc Gerry arrived at 10:20 in the morning after finishing his radio show at the DWAR studio. But instead of going straight to his pet clinic, Doc Gerry passed by a store selling second-hand clothing a few meters away from his clinic. At 10:24, the gunman made his move, crossed the street, and approached Doc Gerry. The actual murder is hidden from the view of the camera. At 10:42 in the morning, January 24, 2011, a gunshot to the back of the head killed Dr. Gerry Ortega. Within seconds, the gunman reappeared on the CCTV screen, running across the street to safety. Note the red fire truck that happened to be passing by as the gunman rushed to escape. The surprised firemen heard a gunshot and saw a man running away with a pistol in one hand. But instead of taking cover, the firemen chased the armed man and arrested him a few hundred yards away. The gunman was later identified as Marlon de Chavez Ricamata, a hired gun from Quezon Province. The authorities also found CCTV footage of Ricamata arriving in Palawan along with two accomplices, Dennis Aranas and Armando Noel Loria. Aranas was arrested days later in Coron, Palawan. A few weeks afterwards, Loria surrendered to authorities. The police traced the ownership of the gun to lawyer Romeo Serratubias, who served as provincial administrator under former Palawan Governor Joel T. Reyes. PCIJ tracked down Serratubias, but he declined to be interviewed on advice of his lawyer. Nonoy Regalado, an aide of Reyes, had confessed to procuring the weapon from Serratubias. Rodolfo Edrad, a former Marine, was identified as the coordinator for the group that murdered Doc Gerry. Edrad also surrendered to the authorities a few weeks after the murder. He was a former close-in security aide of former Marinduque Governor Jose Carrion before allegedly working as a bodyguard for Reyes. Patria Ortega, Doc Gerry's widow, soon filed murder charges against Reyes, Carrion, and Coron Town Mayor Mario Reyes, brother of the former governor. The Reyeses have vigorously denied the charges.
Sabi niya lang is, kung noon nga hindi natin ginawa yan at hindi tayo nag-isip ng ganyan, how much more ngayon na nanahimik na, tahimik na yung buhay ko eh. I lost in the last elections, lumayo na ako, and then ang feeling ko ngayon parang inaapak-apakan pa nila ako. Yun ang sabi ni Gov.
But even as authorities have achieved some progress in investigating Doc Gerry's murder, a disturbing trend worries media observers in Palawan, which used to be a sleepy place, nature's paradise almost, peaceful, not given to violence. In recent years, however, the landscape has started to change, and it is not for the better.
Kasi when I moved here like 15 years ago, it's a very laid-back town. Wala pang, politically, there wasn't much at stake. The political leaders were essentially a monolithic group of individuals and personalities. Things have changed a lot since then.
Wala kami ritong kasaysayan ng political violence. Pero itong dalawang pagkamatay ay hindi ito karaniwang pangyayari. At the same time, it's likewise probably a new trend. Dati-dati rito yung style ng broadcasting and style ng press, yung masasabing hard-hitting.
2 decades ago, the headlines reflected a less confrontational media and political culture. The news pages back then told of stories of street accidents that almost happened and banded the social calendars of local politicians. Back then, journalists and politicians were chummy partners, even comfortable bedfellows. In recent years, the media has broken away from that relationship and taken on a more confrontational stance.
The media culture has matured in terms of the media started to look into real issues. Unlike before when the media was just playing it a laissez-faire kind of attitude in terms of how dynamic or how active the media is really in terms of its role as a fourth state, so to speak.
Nagsimula magkaroon ng tradisyon ng hard-hitting commentary and hard-hitting news. Tapos threats, then actual physical violence. So yung sinasabing peaceful, baka hindi na yung totoo sa ngayon.
Now the political stakes are very high. And when you have such a situation, anything is possible. Violence is possible.
That possibility is heightened by a practice that is alarmingly no longer uncommon in Philippine media. As the lines between journalism and commentary blur, so do the lines between journalists and politicians. The national media itself has set the trend. TV anchors have become senators and congressmen. One had been elected vice president, and last year even returned to his old job reading primetime news scripts. Media agencies have also allowed politicians to dabble as columnists or radio commentators to take advantage of their popularity. In this sense, Doc Gerry was merely following a trend. He had served first as provincial board member of Palawan from 2001 to 2004, before shifting careers to become a radio news commentator. Doc Gerry used his radio program as a popular platform for his advocacies, to protect Palawan's last frontiers against those who would exploit these. But in the 2010 elections, from his radio program, he also campaigned openly against candidate Joel T. Reyes, the former governor who has been named a co-accused in Doc Gerry's murder case. Doc Gerry had campaigned in favor of Reyes' political rival, Jose Alvarez, who happens to be a part owner of the radio station where Doc Gerry worked. Dabbling in journalism and politics at the same time is a practice that is not at all unusual for many journalists in the Philippines. But it is a practice that media observers say increases the risk, especially to the more vulnerable media workers in the countryside.
It's true. It's very common in places like Palawan, places in the provinces, where you have media practitioners, mainstream media practitioners, taking part in politics actively as partisan players in the political game.
As Ortega's case moves forward, Palawan's media takes a second look at its shrinking world. Journalists here fear that the murders of both Batul and Doc Gerry could herald the birth of a culture of violence that for decades had speared the province. There are some who have come forward with solutions that may alleviate the pressure or aggravate it all the more. After Doc Gerry's murder, Puerto Princesa Mayor Edward Hagedorn called local reporters to a meeting and issued a blanket offer to arm the media.
Hinihingi rin natin yung kanilang suggestions. Ano ba gusto ninyo mangyari? Kung gusto nyo mag-armas, kung sa tingin niyo diyan kayo mas magkakaroon ng proteksyon, why not? Tuturuan pa namin kayong gumamit ng barel.
A lot of us opted to avail of that assistance from the city government. It triggered the mentality that, we need to protect ourselves. And a lot of us among our ranks, a lot of people among our ranks are inclined to arm themselves.
Unfortunately, arming local journalists brings with it a whole slew of other problems. If the mayor arms journalists with guns, what happens when journalists need to do stories critical of the mayor? And then there are legal and ethical questions of whether government can provide weapons to private persons. But most of all, the proposed solution sidesteps the bigger issue of impunity.
Yung arming definitely doesn't solve, and we are very much against government officials peddling yung arming as the solution to the killings. Definitely not. Hindi niya hihinto yung pagpatay kahit lahat tayo magdala ng baril. Hindi ibig sabihin the following day wala nang mamamatay. In fact, it's an invitation to greater violence. Kaya lang, sa issue ng arming, kailangan kilalanin yung kondisyon. Kailangan tingnan bakit they feel so vulnerable to the point that they would arm themselves.
It's terribly important. It's imperative that we are able to identify or at the least conclusively point to the possible mastermind. Because without that, there will always be a proverbial sword of Damocles over our heads. You would think that violence could erupt anytime. The implication would be that if you do things like what Gerry Ortega did, something bad might happen to you.
Tapos mafa-filean talaga ng charge yung mastermind. Napakalaki ng impact niya, hindi lang dito sa kaso ni Doc Gerry, but in all other media cases. Kasi the government is sending a signal that it's serious in pursuing the mastermind, na in ending impunity.
But for Doc Gerry's family, true justice lies beyond capturing the mastermind and putting them behind bars.
But we ask ourselves, what does true justice mean? What does it mean? Is it just getting the mastermind, punishing them? Is it that? Yes, we want that. We want them punished. We want the entire Philippines to see na hindi porket mayaman ka at makapangyarihan ka, hindi ka na kayang ikulong. No, we want them punished, yes. Pero true justice is not that. If everybody who's ever listened to my dad and everybody who's ever been loved by my dad and who's been helped by my dad, kung kaya nilang magbago, if we all stop being so scared, wag na tayong maging duwag, wag na tayong maging takot. If kaya nating ipaglaban yung pinaniniwalaan natin.
Damihan natin yung maingay. Magreklamo kayo kung kailangan niyo magreklamo. Magsumbong kayo kung kailangan niyo magsumbong. Yun ang gusto niya sabihin eh.
What was taken away from us was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot. What they killed in our family is that my dad will not be able to attend my sister's graduation. Wala na siya dun sa first communion ng bunso. He won't be there to teach my brother how to court a lady. He won't be there to teach Sophia how to give a speech. What they took from us is a lot. And so we wish for justice. And so we wish na sana mamulat naman yung mga mata ng tao. Kasi kung hindi, we would have sacrificed from our family and all for what? For nothing. My dad's so young and we had so many plans with him. We wanted to do so many things with my dad. And they took him away from us. And we just hope na sana it has meaning, na sana it can change something. Because if it can't, gosh, he would have died for nothing, and that's just a huge blow for us. Huge blow.